Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first episode in our web development series. Today, we're going to be going over a simple introduction of HTML and exactly how it's used. Now, you may have heard of associated technologies such as CSS or JavaScript. So, HTML uses something called tags and elements in order to give a structure to your page. CSS is used to give it a unique appearance and style it, and JavaScript enables some programmability and interactivity into your website. Now, we're going to be going over CSS and JavaScript in later episodes, but today we're going to stick with the foundational element, which is HTML, and I'm going to show you exactly how to make a web page on your local machine. And notice I say local machine here. When you create this web page, it's not going to be accessible through the internet, just on your local machine. Now, let's go ahead and explore here. You can see I have some things open. I have this browser open, and if we look here, it shows the path on our local machine, the F drive, all the way to hello world.html. If you look in my file explorer here, I have this hello world dash HTML. Sorry, hello dash world HTML. And then if we look, we could see here that this path is the same as the one in the browser. So to be explicit here, when you create a document for HTML, you're going to want to give it the .html extension. And when you open that document, like when you double click it, and I'm going to give an example, let me go ahead and do that. If you look, it opened another tab, but that tab is still the same. It still has no content. And I actually have this file open in the notepad, which is why we're not seeing content, because currently the document is empty. I just have a name for it, and I gave it the proper extension. And whenever you're developing web pages, you're going to want to give it the .html extension so that the browser can properly recognize what type of document it is. Now, today I'm using Microsoft Edge, but you can feel free to use Google Chrome, Firefox, etc. Though I honestly would recommend Google Chrome because they have some of the best web developer tools. Now, let's go ahead and learn a little bit about what is happening as this document shows up in our web browser. So, we could see the name of hello world.html, and you can see right here it also says that, and it also says it up here. So, basically, the name of our file is currently the title of our web page. And we could verify that through this right here. This is our title, and you also can see our title on the tab. And it gives us some additional information about, like, where this file is located in our URL in our web browser. So let's go ahead and edit this file a little bit so I can show you exactly how the web browser works when you start creating an HTML document. So I pulled up this text editor here, and this is the hello world.html document. So really quickly, I'm going to increase the size of the font so you guys could see it a little better. Alright, and now hello world is very common whether you're developing in a programming language, or in this instance we're creating a document for a web browser. So hello world is very common to just say, hey, like, something's happening, something's working. So let's go ahead and just type hello world in our document. Hello world. Now if I hit save, I did Control S here to save the document in Notepad. You could see that there hasn't really been any changes to our web page in our web browser. Now, what exactly am I getting at here? So, when you edit a document on your local machine, there are tools that enable it to automatically appear the results of what you had done or what you edited. But because we're using Notepad, we don't really have that feature. In fact, we need to go into the web browser, and we need to reload the web browser so it could update the contents. So let's go ahead, and you can do Control R here. I like to use that when I'm developing. It saves you some time of going up here to click. I'm just going to click here just to be explicit that I'm reloading the page. And as you can see, it says hello world. So what exactly happened? Well, we added content to our document, and once we reloaded the web page, it updated the web page with the content that we added. And this is actually the web browser is actually, there's a term for it, parsing, but our web browser actually went through our document, looked at the contents, and then added the contents to the web page once we reloaded it. So this, these contents though, this isn't exactly always how it would be typed. Now, if you're typing a simple paragraph, you would use a tag, or similarly with a heading, you would use a tag. Now, what do I mean by tag? So, actually, in HTML, when we're creating documents, you want to use tags because it helps the browser interpret your document better, and it also can be helpful for people that are using screen readers if they can't visually see, the effects and the elements. These tags could say, all right, this is a heading, and etc. But we're going to go more into that as we go on in this episode. So let me show you exactly what I'm talking about. So in HTML, every item of interest is an element. So hello world here, this technically could be an element, but we didn't add the correct format for it to be interpreted as an element. An element consists of an opening tag, a closing tag, and the content in between. So let me show you something. If we do, and this is for a heading, don't worry if it doesn't make sense right away. We're going to go over more as we continue. We'll do H1, and notice here you have the less than sign, content, and then the greater than sign. So this is a tag. In fact, this is the opening tag. And content is fit between the opening and the closing tag. And that enables you to, for example, style elements. It enables you to, add features onto elements and properly ascribe them particular attributes. And in this case, H1 is a common tag for a heading. Let me show you what I mean. So, as we mentioned, there's opening tags, content, and then closing tags for your element. And in HTML, parts of the document are just elements. So let's go ahead, and this is how the browser can properly understand or interpret the information in our document, is when we add these tags and elements. So let me show you what a closing tag looks like before we add content to this element. So we're going to do, the less than sign, then a forward slash. And the forward slash indicates that this is the closing tag of an element. So as we mentioned, this is the opening tag, and this is the closing tag, and that we know because it has this forward slash. And that's exactly how the browser interprets it. And let me tell you, if you're developing a complex web page and you don't have all your opening and closing tags down correctly in the right way, it could actually cause issues with the way your document appears or the way screen readers read it, etc. So you want to make sure you're following these best practices. Now let's go ahead and save the document here, and we're going to reload the web page. And I'm going to be doing this through Control R to save time. Now notice there's nothing there. That's because elements and tags are relatively abstract, where it doesn't necessarily show till you add content. So let's go ahead and add the content in the middle like we had suggested. Now I'm going to hit enter here, and I want to be explicit when there's space between the tags. HTML ignores the vast majority of white space, whether it's like an enter, if you hit enter on your keyboard and put it on a new line, or if you do a bunch of spaces. It typically ignores the spaces and just reads the content. But it actually slows down the browser reading your file when you have all this additional white space. So we're going to keep it minimal here. We're going to say hello world once again. Now, there's going to be a difference in this when we load it into our browser, because you may have noticed before we were just using hello world without any tags. Now that could break a web page in some cases depending on where you have it put, but this is following the best practices. You know, we have our element, we have, which is all of this, then we have our opening tag, our closing tag, and then the content within the tag. So let's go ahead and reload the browser. Oh, I didn't save the file. Make sure you save every single time because it won't properly update if you don't save your file. So I saved it there. We're going to reload the web page. And look at that. This looks different than before. It's almost like it's a heading. You know, if you were writing a document and you were using HTML and you wanted it to be properly read by the browser, that's where these tags and elements come into play. It changes how the document is structured and appears. And there are even other tags and elements that allow you to create lists for objects or tables. Even, you know, like let's go ahead and change it. Now before, what we had done, we just put hello world in and it was fine for our example, but you actually might want to change it to a P element, which in HTML stands for paragraph. So let's go ahead and change the opening and closing tags to have the letter P. And P is shorthand for paragraph, like I mentioned, which is just simple text essentially. So now we have hello world with our P opening and closing element, or tag, excuse me. And then now I have it saved, so we're going to go back to the web browser and reload. And notice once again it's smaller. So see, this is a direct example of how the tags affect the elements and the content within to change the structure and appearance of your web page. Now, I'm going to show you how we would actually format an HTML document. You could just use the .html extension on a file, but all web browsers are different and they have different underlying software before they run your document into the web browser. And it actually could cause issues if you're not properly declaring what type of document it is in the file. Also, there's a particular, you know, way to create the document that follows best practices. So let me go ahead and show you exactly what I mean. And that's what I have this index.html file for right here. So we're going to go ahead and double click that. And we actually don't see anything here. And before we continue, let me show you, I actually don't use Notepad. Notepad is nice for, you know, testing and stuff like that, but what you want to use is an actual code editor, which enables you to streamline the process of adding elements, creating web pages. For example, let me show you what I mean. So here I'm going to close out this Notepad document, and then we're going to open up what I like to use. It's called VS Code. It stands for Visual Studio Code. I'd recommend it because it's lightweight, free, and open source. So let's go ahead and open it, and as you can see, there it is. Now, if I pull up my file explorer, we got right here, you can see the name of the folder we're in is my website. Now, I'm not going to go through how to install Visual Studio Code. It's fairly straightforward. You go to the website, use the installer, and then run the application. And it works for macOS, Linux, and Windows, so it should be easy to follow along here. Now, if we look here, we could see index.html. We could also see the path. So this is how I can verify to you that we are looking at the same document as in the file explorer. And you know, it even says open editors, index.html, and we have this little bar pulled up here. You know, there'd be other bars if we had other files or folders open. So that's the best way I can show you that we are actually editing that index.html document in this IDE, or integrated development environment, which also could be more simply called a code editor. And right here we see my website. That's the folder that we're in. So if I open that up, you can see, you know, hello world.html. Let's go ahead and click on it. It'll open it up. And look, that's the document that we had just added in. You know, we added the P elements and we wrapped it in the content. So this shows you that, you can navigate between your files and folders even, because we have this image folder which we haven't gone over yet. But essentially, just to get started, you're able to add content to an HTML file and view it in the web browser. And before we finish off, I just like to show you, because we're going to have future episodes and we're going to be going over more content. But as you can see here, this is what a typical HTML document would look like in a simple sense. We have the first element, which is actually a declaration of what kind of document it is. And this is what I was mentioning, where you want to declare the type of document, because all web browsers are different, and some of the older ones require that you have this. Otherwise, the document may not be read properly, and it may not be translated into the browser properly. So you always want to add this right here. And actually, let me see if we highlight it. May go over some of the information. Sometimes in Visual Studio Code, if you hover an element, it'll give you some information. See, like there, it says the HTML element represents the root of an HTML document, which basically just means that all the content within this opening and closing tag, if you look down here, we see this is the closing tag. These are the contents of the HTML document. And typically, if I highlight all this and I hit tab, it's going to knock it forward a notch. And this is a good way to keep track of which content is within other content, or in this case, you could use the term nested. That's a common term. So, as you can see, this is our head. The head element represents a collection of data about the document that, for example, could be useful for search engine optimization or other data. And as it says, metadata is just a description of data. And that might sound a little complicated, but for example, we have this title here, and the title of our document, which you can see in the web browser, the title is document, and it says document there. Let's go ahead and instead change this to, my first web page. Let's hit save. Now if we reload the browser, and notice it says document here too, if we reload the browser, look at that, we have a new title. It says my first web page, and it even says that here. So basically what I'm trying to get to here is that you're going to want to try to follow a specific format for creating HTML documents, and it's particularly important when they're being read by the browser, so that the browser knows what kind of document it is, how to read it. And this is how you're going to want to have your document set up. You're going to want to have this declaration tag. You're going to want to have this HTML root element. And this right here, this is just an attribute of that element that says this is going to be in English. So this, like I said, this is useful for web browsers, so they know, okay, this document is in English. Just more simple metadata. Now, I didn't type in all this. You could kind of avoid, if you wanted to, you could delete this. But I wouldn't recommend it. It's best practice to have it there. But typically, the document is just this declarative exclamation point doc type HTML to say what document it is. The HTML element. Then you have the head element, which contains data about the document, which in this case, is like the title of the document. And also this viewport metadata ensures that the web browser fits the contents of your web page within a particular width and scale. So as you can see, it says width and device equals device width. So basically, the contents of your web page, the width will change as you're changing the size of your web page. Which, if you've ever changed the size of your web page before, you could just grab the side of it and start dragging it around. Now, the main use for this is if you're viewing on mobile or desktop or tablet or laptop. All these different devices have different viewports or different size screens. So this enables, some flexibility with your web page. It follows a best practice to make sure it appears right. And then that's the head element. It has metadata about the document. Now we have the body, and the body is just simply content that goes on your web page. So let's go ahead and create some content here. I'm going to show you why I like HTML so much, or especially with, Visual Studio Code. And look at that. It's already, look, it even extrapolates. I typed my first web page, and here you could hit tab, and it's going to auto-complete it for you. So we've already gone over these elements. We've gone over the H1 element, and we've gone over the P element. The H1 is the heading, and in particular, you could do H1, H2, up to H6. And the higher the number, the smaller the font size. Basically H1 is the first header, the primary header. And in some cases, it's the title of your web page. So like how our title is my first web page, the content of our web page, the title for the content is my first web page, which makes sense. Then we have the P element, like it says, it represents a paragraph. It says, welcome to my first web page. I hope you enjoy it. Now let's go ahead and hit save, which also in this text editor is Control S. And then in the document that's open in the web browser, you're going to want to do Control R to reload. And look at that. It looks like a title for my web page, and it has some content about it. So if you're following along, you really can make the content within these elements, whether it's the H1 element or the P element, paragraph element. You could edit the content within these elements, and as long as you have an opening and closing tag, notice how they all have opening and closing tags, except metadata. And we're going to be going over that in the next episode. Why do some elements not need a closing tag? Well, metadata, the meta element is a special element that does not need a closing tag. But we're going to be going over more about those elements in future episodes. But just know, you could edit the content here. Body typically is what contains your content, or you might even see an attribute that says, if you're looking at other people's code, you may see an element that says main, and main stands for the main content within the document. So one final thing, I know that we have this image folder right here within our directory. I also want to show you how to bring an image into your web page, which is also done through HTML. An image is actually one of those special tags that also doesn't need the closing tag. It's self-closing. So let's go ahead and let me add it here. And we're going to be going over some stuff as we're doing this, but we're going to be exploring more and explaining more in future episodes. I'm really just trying to get you on your feet and get you started. So we'll do, and it even suggests right here all these different tags that we can use, but we already know what we want to use. We're going to be using the image tag, which is specified with IMG. Now see, it says an image element represents an image. And if I hit tab here, and this follows best practices, the source, and like I said, the charset, the language, these are attributes of the elements. So here, source, it says, if you're reading that, it says that it represents the URL. So this could be, a link to another website of yours. I wouldn't recommend using another person's website or content without their permission. But here you could use the source attribute and get content, from your local machine, from a website. And that's what this content right here within this source attribute, that's what the content is specifying. So for us, we're going to be doing image. As you can see, it even still keeps suggesting things. And this is why Visual Studio Code is so nice, because when you're using the text editor, it may lead to errors. You may be uncertain whether it's actually like which directory it's in. But we could tell here it's in our image directory, and that's what we see right here. So let's go ahead and keep typing it out. And see, once again, it suggests code.jpg. Now if I open my image folder over here, we see that is the picture that I have in that folder. How useful. But let's go ahead and type it out. And like I said, source defines where the image is coming from. Now alt is useful in case the image doesn't show up. So let me go ahead and show you what I mean. This is correct for our image. But here, we're just going to remove it for now. We're just going to say some code, because that's what the content holds in that picture, just some code. So we're going to type this, and then we're going to save this, and we're going to reload the page. And notice it has a little picture emblem right there, and then it says some code. So this is useful if for some reason your picture isn't loading, but people still might want to know, like, well, what would the image have? What In fact, you might even want to be explicit. You might want to say an image of some code. Because when people are using screen readers, they don't even see your image. They only hear, the alt or the alternative. In this case, the alternative is some text because the image didn't load. Now let's go ahead and actually load that image. First I'll reload. As you can see, it edits it again. Now we're going to edit the source. We're going to do image. And if you hit tab here twice, it'll auto-complete for you. That's what I did. And then we're going to do save. Now let's reload this. Wow, and look at that. An image for our first web page. Alright, you guys, thank you so much for tagging along. One final thing before I let you guys go. When you're using images, I'd recommend getting them from somewhere like Pixabay, or there are some other websites. And essentially, these websites allow you to have royalty-free content, such as images, that are not owned by a particular person. They're free to use for your own use. And that is where I got this image from. And you don't want to use people's content without their permission, without asking. And that's why I'm using myself some free, content. In this case, this image was a free content that I got from Pixabay. Now, thank you so much again for tagging along for this episode. I hope it was a good start off for you to learn about HTML. And you know what? Before we go, let's go ahead and delete all this. And I'll save and we'll reload. And let me show you something. If you're using Visual Studio Code, another reason I'd recommend it. Let's just type HTML here. And look, we have some things come up, some suggestions. Well, if you look, this is the content of the first HTML option. Now if you hit the down arrow, and look at that. That's actually the example that I used for you. And you could auto-generate it by doing HTML5 like that. Or you could just scroll through the options or click it. But here we're going to hit tab. And automatically creates the HTML document for you. So look how it says index right here. Well, if I save this and we reload the web browser, look, it says document again. That is so nice in order to just quickly prototype, websites and web pages. So like I said, this is an exciting topic to go over. We're going to be going over more HTML elements, how to give and bring life to your web page through, various elements and features that are provided by HTML. And we'll even go over CSS maybe in the next episode and discuss how to style an element and give it a unique appearance so each of your web pages look and feel how you envision them. So I hope to see you guys in the next episode. Stay tuned.